Welcome to another episode of Band Director Bootcamp, the podcast with productivity and wellness tips for busy band directors. I'm your host, Lesley Moffat, and I'm really grateful to be sharing this platform with you. As busy band directors, we know you don't have lots of time to watch lengthy professional development webinars, so we share 20-minute tidbits with takeaways you can use to support you with professional longevity and a healthier life. So welcome today, everybody, to another episode of the podcast. I'm excited today to bring on a guest, Joey Weisler. Now, listen, Joey's not a band director, but I promise you band directors are going to want to hear what he says. He's got a really unique background as an educator, a researcher, and he's about to get the PhDs coming up in December here. And he combines his insight from his personal experience with trauma and burnout into his work in the humanities. He's a podcast host of Classroom Narratives, Healing and Education, which is a podcast exploring how storytelling, music, and conversation can anchor recovery in education. So Joey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Lesley. It is such a privilege to be here. I'm so delighted.
Yeah, we're going to talk about maybe some deeper stuff today. So those of you listening, it might not be our typical thing because we're going to dive deep today into some stuff because I talk about productivity and wellness tips, and today's going to be wellness. And it all started because a couple of weeks ago I had an experience in my classroom that really shook me to my core, and I am trying to figure out how to cope with it and deal with it. And so I've turned to Joey's podcast for some help, and then I'm like, hey, I'll just talk to Joey and put him on my podcast. So I get my own therapy session and y'all get to listen in. That's basically what's going on. And so before we really have Joey come in and talk about his background, I think it'll make more sense if I just share with you what happened a couple weeks ago in my classroom. And my little beginning band, like 40 little sixth graders all sitting there, and we're just starting to play. I think as Mary Had a Little Lamb, or Merrily We Roll Along, they call it that in the book. And we just start playing it, and I noticed that out of all 40 kids, they're all playing their instrument except two of them in the back corner, in the fourth row back there. And I look at what they're doing. Instead of playing their instruments, and they've got a bag between them, and in their bag, each of them has a hand in the bag. And I looked down to see what it is they're holding, and it was a gun. And I had about 8 more measures to figure out, what am I supposed to do now? All the scenarios ran through my head of, is this run, hide, fight, or the intruder's not in the hall, so how do I do a lockdown? All the things were going through my head. And meantime, I continued to conduct the piece. And by the time we finished, the kids put their instruments down, and I held out my left hand, and I just kept eye contact with those kids. And I said, I'm walking back towards you right now, and you're going to lay that in my hand. We're not going to talk about it. You're just going to put it in my hand right now. And the minute it was in my hand, I realized it was a water pistol. But in that moment, in what felt like an eternity, I realized what responsibility that was, what could have happened. Was I supposed to jump in front of the kids? What was supposed to happen? And it brought back a horrifying incident in 1988, my first year of teaching, when a student was really upset with me. And I was on bus duty that next morning after I had called his mother, and he all of a sudden I felt the barrel of a gun on my temple, and my glasses were knocked off, and I heard the words, Miss Moffat, I'm going to kill you. I hadn't thought about that in a very long time. And it came right back to me. And so the last couple of weeks, it's like all of a sudden, I'm not going to self-diagnose post-traumatic stress, but there's something going on. My body and my brain are in a different place than they are. Y'all know I practice meditation and yoga all the time, which in the moment served me well, because as I felt my body and my adrenaline and my body go into panic, my automatic response was to do the slow breathing and to be mindful of what I was doing in the moment. But the next day, when all the kids walked into class, including those 2 boys who were told not to do that again, I was so disturbed by the fact that A, they were back there, and B, all those other kids had witnessed that, and we couldn't talk about it really. We didn't do anything. And so are they just so used to it? Is this the new normal? And it's just kind of freaked me out, to be honest. I used to be able to tune all of that out. All you band directors know the sounds in a band room. You can do all kinds of things with all that racket. And people would say, how can you handle that? And I'd say, I can just tune it out. but I can't tune it out anymore. Anyway, I say all this because I feel it in my body so much, just that on edge now in my classroom. And the episode of Joey's that I really tuned into after this was a woman talking about trauma and how it is in the body and all of this. And it's helping me make sense of this as I try to figure out what to do. So, Joey, I'm sorry for such a long intro. I never talked that much at first, but I know from talking to a lot of my colleagues that they've experienced other traumatic types of situations in their room. And we're told really not to talk about it. People don't want us talking about it. Admin, district people, they don't want us talking about it. But it's time. It is time we talk about it because there are more of us out there dealing with this than not. So, Joey, you've brought a lot to this table. You were at Marjory, Stoneman, Douglas, and Parkland when that incident happened. You've lost a friend to suicide, and you experienced severe burnout in your first teaching role. So talk to us a little bit. I'm coming in on super heavy stuff, sorry, about
your listeners need to hear it all. Thank you, Lesley.
what have those experiences done to help shape the work that you're doing today?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Lesley because after I burned out in my first year of teaching, I turned to her text that hit me with such vulnerability and courage. Love the job, lose the stress. And this is back in 2022, and I reached out to her to say, hey, I don't want to bother you, but your work is really impacting the way I'm combating my own burnout after my first year of teaching. And that's when Lesley and I knew each other. But I wanted to mention that I am a trauma-based scholar based upon a couple of instances that I've been through back in 2018, 2019. And I'm talking to you tonight from my home in Parkland, Florida. For those that may remember, Parkland, Florida is the site of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School tragedy that was just as well known at the time as Columbine and Sandy Hook, for the loss of 17 lives and the wounding of 17 others. And out of this movement, or rather out of this tragedy, birthed the March for Our Lives movement, which was formed by many different community members of people that I knew because I used to substitute teach in their classes, such as Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg. And this is a community that I stood a part of just before my first year of teaching. I'm an alumnus of Stoneman Douglas, but on the day of the tragedy, I was actually just next door at West Glades Middle School. And these two schools share a football field. I mean, we are so close in proximity that the high school teachers at Stoneman Douglas had to come into our building to get safety. And when the shooter fled from the high school, he went right by our front gates, and nobody knew if he was going to come into us next or leave weapons. Nobody knew. And at a different part of the school from where I was substitute teaching that day, down back in the portables, students did recall hearing the gunshots at that time. So that's where I was stationed that day as a district substitute teacher. And a few weeks after that, due to matters completely unrelated, I lost a friend due to suicide. And trying to digest all of those just constantly made me feel as if I was returning back to my home city, where I was always honeymooning this idea of having my first teaching job there. And I would keep returning back like, wow, I'm just standing on ashes and dust. And my first teaching job was indeed at the middle school I was at on Valentine's Day for that entire coming fall semester, fall 2018, in the same classroom that I was in the day before the tragedy. And that brought back constant PTSD for me. I spent most of that time hearing the stories of my students, some who had friends, siblings, some had parents in that building, and trying to aid them as a first-time ever teacher through any recovery efforts that I can help them navigate through. And eventually, when I moved over to a city over, same district, but just one city over, where people had friends. These schools are rivals. They play. What sport is that? Football. I'm not a sports person. They play football together. They're rivals in all those different sports. That leadership team shamed me on several different occasions for the efforts I was trying to make. That school hired me in January, and they came back to me in February. And my first year teacher mentor said to me on the 14th, she pulled me aside, and she said, this is the first year anniversary. She said, I know this is a hard day for you, but please don't make it sad for everyone else. It's still a happy day for us around here. And the amount of shame that was given to me by trying to still find healing in front of this group is what eventually drove me out the door.
Mm.
I'm not sure I answered your full question. So
Yeah.
after that, yeah, I then went to pursue my work in trauma studies as a way to not only find my own wellness in terms of being able to tell that story and process it, but also help others as well. And take pride in the courage to be vulnerable with the stories that we carry as educators.
Yeah. And I love the way you do this. You talk about in your podcast and in your research, you're talking about the role that music, narrative, and dialogue can help with recovery. So can you tell the music teachers or other teachers that might be listening how those can help them find some resilience after they've experienced trauma?
Absolutely. I'm a big believer that there's all different types of expression that help us navigate in the aftermath of tragedy. As a composition professor, of course, the first place I turn towards is writing. We call it narrative medicine, where we invite students, again, this is not a mandate, but through a trauma-informed mindset, we invite students to write about their traumas and write about their instances on paper. Now, this is a big, blurry line that we cross in education because, again, we're not trained to be pseudopsychologists. We're not supposed to play that role. But there is an argument that says that if academia has blood on its hands from all the things it goes through and all the politics and all the bureaucracy, then its hands are already dirty enough to hear what the students need to say and what they need to do. And in the terms of, we are no longer in a position to sanitize the thoughts of our students. And that's important to know. The way that I separate myself from that is by using a rubric to make sure that whatever my students say, I'll acknowledge it, but I'll use a rubric to check it off. But there's so many different other ways that the humanities could be used in the classroom, such as music and expression. And even though music is more towards trying to find some sort of accuracy, like you have to play the right note or else the whole song sounds different, right? There's a form of expression that music allows that syncs the brain and the body through some form of kinesthetics and expression in the aftermath of tragedy. So the work that I do focuses on how music and writing all play a role in expression. I'll also mention that I'm teaching a first-year college seminar through St. John's University. I've been adjuncting one of their first-year programs called Liberal Studies for 4 years now. And it's one of my favorites because I get to meet all these brand new students who are fresh out of high school, new into college, and give them the most positive experience that I can come up with for them. And in the third week of class, I always begin, once we get through all this syllabus and theory and all the groundwork for the course, we always turn towards viewing Demi Lovato's 4-part series, Dancing with the Devil. And in this series, we focus on Demi's recovery from her overdose. Demi Lovato overdosed in 2018. And the way that she was able to rebound through that incident is by using music and bringing that a part of her life. One of my favorite theorists, Nelson and Weathers, mentioned, that's two people, Nelson and Weathers. What they do is that they talk about how different instruments cause different impacts in our brain and how the actual way that we produce music and listen to music is a very binary shaped experience, meaning to make music and to hear music are very, very two unmatched things that both produce responses in our body and in our brains that bring us towards a sense of solace and healing from whatever else is going on up there at the same time.
Yeah. I'm 100% sure every band director or music teacher listening right now can think of times when music has helped for healing. I know my husband can come home from school, and if I'm playing piano, he can be like, great day, or better give her some space because I'm playing different style or using it as my own therapy. But we've also used our music, with our musicians at Veterans Day. We can go in there and help with things like that. So it can be a very soothing and helpful thing. I had a boy named Alex who he had lost his mother, and it was just some hard stuff going on at home. And he had a bass trombone solo, improvised solo coming up in our jazz rehearsal one day. And he's right before the song started, he goes, "I can't eat in my laundry basket today." He was in a bad mood. Well, the cat peeing in his laundry basket was like the last step of all these other things that had hit him. Lots of actual,
The
like
final
I said, his
straw.
mom, his mom had actually been very ill and had died just recently. And so just all of it got there. And then we ended up starting the tune and I kick it off. And his solo was just visceral. The anger, it was like he went through this therapeutic music and the kids just kept playing under him, that bass and piano and drums behind him. We just let him go. He went for a very long time, but he was physically wiped out when he was done with that. And it was like he just channeled it all through the music. So, we all have different ways that we can do this. And as music educators out there, our music plays such an important part in helping people themselves and with others in healing. You have I was going to...
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was going to segue into that a little bit because, music and narratives that we've talked about. When somebody's in a space where they need an opportunity to either calm down or something they can do so that they can stay calmer, I know you've got something that you call the 5-finger meditation.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that, please?
Absolutely. So the 5-finger meditation was taught to me in Parkland as a resiliency effort when I returned that fall. So we're talking about 6 months after the tragedy, as a way to help us find some sort of healing in our own classroom. So I cannot take credit for it. I did not create it, but I do have it in my own toolkit that I've carried with me I've taught at about 8 or 9 plus different institutions between secondary and post-secondary since the year 2018. So these little strategies, such as the 5-finger meditation, have followed me all the way around for almost 6.5 years. And what the strategy does is that it has students stop what they're doing and take the palm of one hand and stick it forward in front of them. What they then do is that they take the pointer finger of the opposite hand and they take a great big inhale. As they move the pointer finger up, the thumb of the hand sticking out, and exhale as they move the pointer finger down the thumb. And then another inhale, move that pointer finger up the pointer finger of the other hand, and exhale, moving that finger down. And we do that through all 5 fingers, and then we switch hands. And as they're doing that, I coach them through different affirmations and different mindsets, such as think about where you are in this time, in this place. And I mean very deliberately, because remember, I'm teaching college here, so attendance is not mandatory. I said to them, think about what brought you into my class today. What are you intending to get out of being in this space of healing today, and focusing them on the present moment. And I usually play music while they're doing this. I rotate it by the month. So in October, November, I play music from The Help, one of my favorite movies of all time. Beautiful score. And as we're thinking about that, I had them think through ways that they can find their own healing. And by the end of it, we always do affirmations that say, I am kind, I'm smart, and I'm important. Also another line taken from The Help. And this takes about 90 seconds and it's very effective with students. And something else that got me in my first year of teaching, which maybe Lesley and I can address together as to why we try to run from these conversations so quickly. I had one of my specialists come in, my curriculum specialist, she's third in command for the whole school, come into my room and say, that little finger thing you do is what she called it. She says, it's just a 90-second time waster. Every second that you're not teaching kids towards the state exams. And I'm looking at Lesley's facial expressions as well. I wish you could all see us. She said, any minute that you're not spending having them on the computers doing their little iReady standardized test program softwares, she says, that's wasted time. So every day that you do that, you're wasting 90 seconds of their time. And at that point, I was like, this is a lose-lose. Because one thing that I think about is, why hide from ways that can help our students?
Yeah, that's crazy. Because I do the 4 minutes with my kids every day, and I use 528 Hertz on the system every day. So they hear that pitch and that resonance, and it just causes them automatically now, after we practice it every day, that sound, and then it's just talk them through a body relaxation and deep breath, because that's the foundation of our instruments, right? Is the breath coming through it. And our heart rate is our metronome. So we come in with an elevated heart rate. By the time we're done doing that, we've all pretty much synchronized our heart rates much lower and slower. So we physiologically helped them go from fight or flight, which is middle school halls, to,
Yes.
hey, I'm more focused and can learn now because I am more in the present moment. Right?
And we're
The
not talking,
power of that.
snippy, snappy 50-minute classes here. These were 104-minute long
Oh,
blocks
good
with eighth graders.
Lord.
I had to do something to help them, and I was told, no, I'm not allowed to do that.
Oh, that's nuts. Well, yeah, you were doing the right thing. That's crazy. Hey, before I want to talk to you a little bit more about some stuff here, but before we ask our final questions, I want to stop and pause for a moment and thank our sponsor, the Empowered Music Educator Academy. The Empowered Music Educator Academy helps busy band directors create successful programs, build supportive communities, and feel frickin' amazing by providing productivity and wellness tips that support professional longevity and a healthy life.
You're listening to the Band Director Boot Camp podcast, brought to you by the Empowered Music Educator Academy. At the Academy, we're dedicated to supporting busy band directors like you with practical productivity and wellness strategies. Whether it's through our books, coaching sessions, or GPTs designed specifically for band directors, we've got everything you need to lead a successful music program without burning out. Let us help you achieve excellence in your work without working around the clock.
All right, we are back with Joey Weisler, and I wanted to take a minute because can't let you go without talking about this project you just got started recently. Super grateful for it, for one thing, and I see this becoming a really, really helpful resource for educators of all kinds, but my music people that are out there listening right now, share this with other people. But I want you to talk a little bit about classroom narratives, healing, and education. A little bit about what's your purpose with this? Who should be tuning in and listening, and why?
So the Classroom Narratives Healing in Education podcast was conceived in late August, early September of this year. And it was a way for me to look at myself and say, you know what? It's going to take a village. It's going to take a village to start these conversations about trauma and vulnerability and wellness in our classrooms. Or this might sound controversial, but if you listen to her speak, it's phenomenal. I take the term brain wellness out of Sue Klebold, who is the mother of Dylan Klebold from Columbine. When her son committed his atrocity in 1999, she became what she coins to be a brain health advocate to understand why situations escalate like that to the way that they do. And she has been an incredible activist in trying to actually really prevent mass tragedies as they've been. And wow. I mention this as, again, someone whose community has witnessed the Parkland tragedy. And I'm actually an incredible follower of the work that Sue has done for her community. And I also recommend, whether you are an educator or a music teacher, to just focus on her memoir called A Mother's Reckoning to think about these types of strategies. So
that's crazy, amazing that she's
absolutely
done that. Wow.
She's charismatic, her work, honestly. Wow. And it makes me realize that we need a village to all be like that, where we have the courage to say something's wrong. Something is so very wrong, but we have the tools to prevent it from happening again and again. We have the tools, we just need to know how to use them. So the Classroom Narratives Healing and Education podcast serves as a platform for people to come together and process the types of instances that happen in our classrooms, from situations ranging from mass violence to students struggling with their emotional wellness, even teachers struggling with their emotional wellness, and what we can all do in order to combat burnout. Because statistics show that teachers typically leave within their first 5 years of teaching, or at least they contemplate exiting the profession within those first couple of years. I know I did. I left after 172 days. School year's 180. And it makes me realize that there's something very broken with our system that needs to be dismantled and rebuilt from scratch. But no one's going to do that. No one's going to take this whole system apart. So these conversations are the closest we can get to the reform that we'll need to move forward. So in this podcast, we're hearing from other teachers. You're hearing from some Parkland teachers as well. You're hearing from social workers. You are hearing from community members that have all been witnesses, if not even firsthand people experiencing what burnout looks like in their classrooms and what burnout has looked like for their students. And the goal is to, again, use these conversations to create a village of people who can start the change that we really need to see within our classrooms.
Well, it's really important work that you're doing. And I long for the day when we don't need podcasts like that. But yeah, because I wasn't talking about the things that had happened in my classroom for a long time until recently. Because, and then I hear more from other people. I felt so isolated and alone. And so appreciate that you are talking about this, that other people are starting to talk about it, and that we can all then, support one another instead of trying to figure it out or live through it on our own. It's really tough.
Absolutely. And I agree with you, Lesley, because I always think, wow, this Parkland shooting was the initial catalyst for me to do my doctoral research, which again I'm defending in about 6 weeks. And it's very bittersweet, so close to that finish line, because I sit here and I almost feel a sense of guilt for knowing that this project began from that tragedy. Like, it should have never had to happen. I should have never had this dissertation topic. Maybe I shouldn't have even been in this program, but that's the imposter syndrome talking, because I know that that's what I had to work on. But because it did happen, and we can go back and change that, I focused on this tagline, rather this expression that I got from my friend's funeral. At my friend's funeral in the spring of 2018, the pastor mentioned that even though my friend who died by suicide is no longer alive, his friends and family need to live out his life by transforming his scars into stars. And to me, that's the motive behind all my research, as well as this podcast, to really pay homage to the people that need to hear these stories and ensure that their scars are also transformed into stars, as a way to ensure that they also have better futures and amplifying light while doing so.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights and expertise here with us today.
Such a pleasure, Lesley. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and all you folks out there, I know this was a heavy conversation today. I've had a lot of heavy conversations in the last couple of weeks because there's a lot of stuff. If you taught through COVID, you probably understand what a lot of this is about too. So don't try to figure all this out alone on your own. We're going to put the links to Joey's podcast in the show notes. So hop over there and please share this information so that other teachers, when they need it, like I did, have it as a resource, have it as a way to listen, to hear their story being told by somebody else. And then you hear what that person has done to help get to the next steps of healing, so that we have help doing that. So
absolutely. And also my contact information is found within the podcast. Our socials are on there as well. And I strongly encourage you to please reach out. I'm always open to networking. I'm always open to chatting. And I love meeting new teachers to, again, ensure that we can together amplify light to help the system. So I look forward to hearing from each of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and do respond to him, you guys. Joey's a real person, I promise. Yeah, he'll respond back. He responds to me. So how about that? So thanks for showing up to all of you out there who keep making a difference in kids' lives every day through the magic of music education. The work you do matters, and so do you. Join us next time on Band Director Bootcamp for another episode of productivity and wellness tips to make your life a little easier.